Hello, this is Ian Williams from CX Club and Jericho. I hope you're doing well during this very, very strange COVID-19 lockdown situation. We're several weeks in now. This is the next round of CX Club. We're going back to the topics that I originally introduced. And we've spoken about leadership and we've spoken about company culture already. But today I wanted to introduce the topic of employee experience. And to that end, I have my very good friend and esteemed colleague, Alim Erginoglu. And I keep on getting his name right, so I think I may have just pronounced that correctly. Because he always tells me the gin is like guinea pig in the middle, Erginoglu. Alim and I have known each other for must be 15 years, something like that.
15 years, Ian.
Yeah, something like
Time
that.
flies.
We actually, yeah, I know it does, doesn't it? And we don't look a day older.
You're in a good shape always.
Oh, well, I wish I looked as young as you, mate. So the reason why Alim and I know each other is we actually live in the same village. We're probably we're less than a mile away from each other right now, I think.
Yeah.
We live in the same village. And the fact that Alim works in the employee experience space and has done for a long time. I work in the customer experience space. And we've had many conversations, sometimes at parties when we've been drunk, about the relationship between customer experience and employee experience, but we've never actually brought those two subjects together onto a webinar. So Alim works for Willis Towers Watson on the employee experience space, and we share a lot of the same views. So I'm really, really pleased to invite him onto this webinar. So how are you doing, Alim?
I'm very well, thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure.
It's a great opportunity, and the topic is fantastic because this topic probably, separately are hot topics in our worlds, but somehow it's neglected by both sides. It's not linked, or when I say neglected, not linked together. So it's a good way together. We'll probably find some interesting relationship between these two, and hopefully we'll kind of link them together and discuss. Let's see where we
absolutely. Well, one of the things I would say within the CX space, I think a lot of people talk about the fact that there's a link, but I think in reality, a lot of people fail to actually make that link happen. So tell us a little bit, give us a little bit of introduction about yourself and the kind of work that you do, Alim.
Sure, absolutely. I'm in the employee experience world almost 15 years. I have been working in various consultancy firms as an employee engagement, specialist consultant. And, I've been working for ISR, which has been the grandfather of Willis Towers Watson's Employee Insight company. Then I worked for Charles Perrin. I worked for Ipsos Mori for a while, and I'm back to Willis Towers Watson world. And I'm Turkish originally. Some people might think that where this surname is coming from, this strange surname. Yeah, and I moved to the UK and this lovely Wilbercote over 15 years ago, and great that I met you.
She is a lovely, beautiful woman, actually. Very, very lovely
very much.
Lady. And obviously Alim is obviously incredibly handsome. So he manages to attract this incredibly beautiful woman, and you can imagine they have very beautiful children as well. So
Thanks very much indeed.
I hate you. So
I'm gonna show this video to Rachel. She'll love it.
Are you? Okay, yeah. She'll kick my butt next time she sees me.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to employee engagement, I mean, I live with it. I love the concept. Um, it's in my soul. Every day I think about it. I sleep with employee engagement. I wake up with employee engagement. Not because, I'm obsessed with the subject, but I'm an employee at the end of the day. Either I work for
Yeah.
myself or somebody else. And I see that this concept of employee engagement and employee experience is not kind of monopolized or dominated by leadership. It's for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I love this subject. Yeah.
What do you see as being, in terms of your world and my world, what do you see as being the relationship between the two?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at employee experience, it's a new term. I mean, we have been talking about employee engagement in the last 10, 15 years. Beforehand, it was employee satisfaction, but terminologies change. But employee experience is a new term. I mean, probably in the last 1 or 2 years, people are talking about employee experience.
Yeah.
Because we always thought that, employee engagement was everything, covering everything. But now we realize that employee engagement is the outcome of employee experience. But when we look at customer experience,
Right. Okay.
it has been there for many years. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but an established topic. It has been there, for a while. Obviously, I'm sure it went through the same stages like employee engagement, employee satisfaction to employee experience, and customer experience. The same pattern maybe. But there's definitely a big relationship and connection between these two topics. However, people talk about these two, but we rarely link these two topics. So I think both of them are very interesting, very real for every one of us, either we're an employer or a customer.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important to link them and find ways to understand each topic from different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's interesting what you said about the history of customer experience. I think as a topic, it really kicked off about 25 years ago. And it took quite a while to reach engagement. So I only first started hearing about it about 15 years ago, that it really started coming to the surface. I came from a strategic marketing background, and I saw a lot of similarities between customer experience and strategic marketing. It's interesting how it's evolved, because customer experience has now almost become bastardized, without using a nasty, not too nasty word, because I think a lot of people use it to mean lots of different things now. It's used to try and sell technology products. It's used to try and often people use it interchangeably with customer service and with contact center conversations. Now, I'm not saying that customer service and contact centers aren't part of the whole customer experience ecosystem, but they're not necessarily the same things. But it's interesting what you said about the relationship between employee experience and customer experience, because on one of the very first few conversations that I had with a client about customer experience, we came to the logical view that you can't expect your employees to give your customers a good experience if they are not getting a good experience themselves.
Yeah.
And that ties back to the service profit chain model.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's a good saying, unengaged employees don't create engaged customers. It's valid. So I think that these two are very correlated. But interestingly, when I started talking, to organizations, when I started talking to some HR professionals, when I asked them if they link these two topics, 90%, 95%, I get an answer no.
Yeah. Why do you think they're currently being dealt with separately?
Well, I mean, the first, probably the main reason is employee experience is a fairly new topic.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an established topic. And it has been always in the hands or the radius of HR people.
Yeah.
I'm not saying employee experience, employee engagement was neglected by organizations or leadership, but it was a completely surreal, unmeasurable topic maybe in their world, that it was kind of left to HR. But on the other hand, CX was also was within the maybe marketing, sales, and world. It was kind of under their umbrella, so they kind of acted in different lines, and when we come to maybe the reality of employee experience, I mean, as I said, I mean, let's go one by one. I mean, it's a new topic in a way. It's not easy to measure, or arguably it's not easy to measure. It's because it's not solid. It's not like a table or easy mathematical output. And EX is also a new topic. I mean, when we look at the pattern or the history of employee satisfaction, it became employee engagement only 10-15 years ago. And employee experience is a very, very current topic. We've been talking about employee experience in the last 2 years, maybe, not before. And employee experience and employee engagement are, yes, they are brothers and sisters, but they're not the same thing. So,
you said that one is a product of the other one. And coming back to the original conversation, I think it's quite ironic, because you said that employee experience is owned by the HR director, and then customer experience that sometimes belongs in different parts of the organization, depending on which organization you're in. So sometimes it's in sales, sometimes it's in marketing, sometimes they create a customer experience team and it belongs there. Sometimes it belongs in the digital area, because it depends on each organization's view of customer experience. And the problem that you have is that customer experience exists right across the business, because every function of the business has an impact, directly or indirectly, upon the experience of the customer. And I would argue, in the same way that employee experience is owned by HR, but the problem is that employees don't just exist in HR, employees exist right across the business. So in the same way that customer experience needs to be owned by the organization as a whole, employee experience needs to do the same. But because of the functional silos that we always talk about, functional silos, which is the thing we're trying to get rid of, is exactly the reason why EX and CX have never worked properly with each other.
Exactly.
So the classical problem we're trying to solve causes the disconnect between these two subjects.
And it's a very good question. Maybe we should ask the question again. Let's say there's somebody here would like to link EX with CX. What do they need to do?
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
they can start from. So I think the number one priority is to answer the question of what's the purpose? What's the purpose in the organization? And from the very simplistic point of view, the first purpose is providing a good employee experience for our employees. Mm-hmm. So to create them a great place to work. And secondly, again, very simplistic point of view, our purpose is to provide our customers the best service and the best experience.
And the reason why we do that is because we know we give employees a good experience, they give customers a good experience. If customers get a good experience, we make more profit from the customers.
Exactly. I mean, it's very, very simple equation.
Service profit chain. Yeah, exactly.
Service profit
So,
chain.
so just coming back to the, we spoke earlier about, I'd like to investigate, if that's okay, Alan, the difference between employee experience and employee engagement. You said they weren't exactly the same thing. So what do you see as being the difference between the two?
Sure. Employee engagement is the output of good employee experience. So
Okay.
but before to come to employee experience and employee engagement, there's
Yeah.
one crucial starting point I think all need to know, which is called employee value proposition, EVP.
Okay. Let me just write that down.
Sure.
Employee value proposition. Okay, I've got that down now, just so in case I need to refer back to it. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about employee value proposition.
So employee value proposition is the organization's promise to its employees. So when I say promise, basically
Right.
what we're
Okay.
saying is, why should you work for me and not for somebody else? Why do I need you in this organization? What can I give you, or what's my promise to you as an employee? If you start working here, there'll be some promises that I'm going to follow. But in return, I want certain things from you, from my employees. So it's a kind of mutual conversation.
It's almost like a contract, almost.
Exactly. It's a promise contract. I promise you something as an organization, but obviously I'd like to see something in return.
Yeah.
So from the basic point of view, it's a promise relationship. It's a contract. So if we know our EVP, if we create our EVP clearly from the beginning,
Yeah.
if we clearly explain our promises to our employees, to our workforce, it will be then easier to create the right employee experience.
Okay.
Because there's also the element of culture with an EVP. Obviously, culture is not something we can write down.
Yeah.
It's not a constitution. It's not a set of rules. It's a behavior. It's the way people behave in the organization in certain situations.
Okay. So when we talk about culture, often the embodiment of culture is often seen as like mission, vision, values. So is employee promise an extension of a value statement?
It is in a way, because in the relationship between employees and the employer, when we look at the EVP, the first pillar is the purpose.
Yeah.
And obviously employees would like to experience mission, vision, values, image, and reputation, in the right way, in the proper way within the organization. But in return, the expectation from the employer is to deliver on company mission, vision, and all these values. Additionally with the right customer brand, etc. So there's a direct relationship. There's an expectation, and also the delivery of those value proposition via the leadership, the organization's management.
It's really interesting what you say about this, because I can see the sort of culture, mission, vision, values is almost like the starting point. The EVP sounds to me as if it's like a reflection, or it reflects the culture of the organization in terms of a promise to the employees, and it's a two-way promise. It's like a contract between the two.
Yeah.
And then a good EVP, a good value proposition, leads to hopefully a good employee experience, and then a good employee experience leads to good employee engagement.
Engagement. Exactly.
There's almost like a series of steps there. In terms of EVP, you speak about the fact that employee promises are at the heart of an employee value proposition. In my world, we do customer promises, and customer promises form the basis of the brand promise. Okay. Is there a similar relationship between the employee promises within the within the employee value proposition and the employer brand? Do the two things work hand in hand with each other?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in EVP, I mean, firstly, we look at the concept of purpose, and there's employee experience, and then expectation from the employer. It's more or less the same thing in CX. I mean, in the purpose, the employee experiences, or in other words, employees would like to experience, to see good mission, vision, and values are applied properly. And this also reflects to the image and the reputation of the company. But on the other side, who's going to deliver this? It's the companies, the leadership. You know, they need to deliver the mission rights, the vision rights, reputation, customer brand. So these two things talk to each other. So in one place, the employees would like to experience something really well, but in return, the promises are being realized by the organization. And there are three more aspects. You know, first one is purpose, and the second one is people, which means the organization shows the real leadership, good management, and a people culture.
Yeah.
And obviously, the expectation from the employer is, demonstrate a desired behavior, desired culture, and values. So they're again interrelated. The last two is work. Obviously, the promise is, a good job content, work environment, tools and resources, which all employees would like to see from
that's almost like a minimum standard, isn't it, really?
Exactly. And the last one is total rewards. Okay. I'm performing, I'm responding to the promise of the organization, but in return, what are you offering me? Good wage, satisfactory benefits, and looking after me when it comes to the financials and etc. So these things are, I guess, similar in CX world, is it?
Yeah, I guess so. The clearly the brand has to underpin what I always say is that the customer promise is at the heart of the brand.
Yeah.
Okay, and the brand makes the promise to the customer, and then the organization has to deliver against that promise through its product proposition, its channel proposition, and its service proposition. So it's sort of rounded from both sides. So it sounds similar to what you're talking about in terms of the contract within the promise relationship, the contract between the employer and the employees. And everything is established through the value proposition, which reflects the employee promises, which are also reflected within the employer brand, which is, I guess, the employee value proposition and the employer brand are two sides of the same coin in many ways.
Yeah. But obviously, I think we need to kind of reverse, step back for a second, and maybe for our friends watching this video, we need to remind them, before we move into the shaping our employee experience, we definitely need to work on our employee value proposition. Because we don't know where we start from if we don't have this purpose or the real promise and the contract. If we don't create the pillars right from the beginning, then the experience that we're offering might not be right or might not be fitting with what we're creating. So it needs to be, EVP needs to be, created well by all companies. And it's not something like a couple of workshops, leadership and HR sits down and write down the nice things. I mean, we need unbiased big data to create a good employee value proposition. We need a lot of data. It's not only employee data, but we need data from customer side. We need data from our internal customers as well. Therefore, we know how we can create the best employee experience for our employees. So the good employee experience, obviously, if we get the pattern, EVP, then great employee experience, then we can talk about employee engagement. Because
the next question I was going to talk about is the relationship between employee experience and culture. So that being the case, I think we've kind of covered this a little bit already, but are we saying that in many ways trying to establish a culture starts with mission, vision, values first, and then your employee value proposition hopefully reflects the mission, vision, values and the desired. Hello, are you there? I don't know what happened. You disappeared on the screen. I do apologize. I think something's happening at my end. So as I said, the culture, the desired culture, mission, vision, values, your employee value proposition reflects that. And then the other side of the employee value proposition, I suppose, is the employer brand. But then your employee experience comes from your employee value proposition, and then your employee engagement comes from the employee experience. So it's almost a little bit like culture, EVP, employee experience, employee engagement. Is that correct, or am I saying it wrong?
No, it's spot on, Ian. Definitely. I mean, culture starts with an organization's mission, vision to shape or reshape the behaviors.
Yeah.
But culture isn't our EVP or our brand. It's the foundation of how work gets done. So we need to be very clear on that. And also, culture is buildable and changeable. These things are not very rigid. Same as employee value proposition. These things can change based on the strategy.
Well, the environment that you're in changes.
Exactly.
Therefore, your strategy has to change, and therefore your culture changes. And in the conversation I had a few weeks ago with Adrian Snook, who's a culture expert, he made the point that culture isn't necessarily something that can be easily manufactured. You can influence it, hence the need for mission, vision, values. But also the fact that culture in many ways is a product of the environment. So that kind of and culture is influenced by lots of different things. If you're a multinational organization, there are actually a lot of racial cultures that can influence the culture of a business from outside. But that leads me on to the next question, really, because I've seen company cultures which have been quite aggressive cultures, and that's because of a very heavy influence from leadership. And leadership in this one particular environment was very, very, very aggressive. So I've always seen there being a triangular relationship between leadership, culture, and employee experience. That's my view. Do you have a view on that? Is that correct, or do you think that's incorrect view?
No, there's definitely a very strong relationship between these three, but I call this a kind of clashing relationship. The reason I'm saying this is, well, I mean, we're all working. We have been in so many organizations. We're kind of living with it. I mean, there's always a leadership culture,
right?
And there's also employee culture. So
Ah, yeah, I
what I
see.
see is two things usually clash. So this is where the problem starts from. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with something, a concept is clashing within the organization, but we need to find a kind of way to shake hands. So that's why we need a kind of active listening. You know, we need to understand if we're the leadership team, well, if we like to impose something or not, it's irrelevant. We have to understand what's the current culture in this organization and how leadership and also employees from every perspective see this culture. So what I'm trying to get to is the gap. Because if we could understand the gap, if we understand the codes of the culture in any organization, therefore it's easier for both sides.
Yeah.
It's easy for leadership because they know that, oh, wait a second, we think that the culture is here, but our employees are thinking the opposite way. So therefore there's a problem. How are we going to walk together towards our objectives, towards the right strategy? So therefore the clever thing should be for any organization to have an active listening, continuous listening, and understand how employees experience certain things in the organization, plus how they see the culture. So I think back to your three-way, the only approach to make it successful is to, again, find the relationship, pinpoint the gaps between two sides, leadership and employees' perception on culture.
And that leads me to think that if there is a gap between leadership culture and employee culture, that in many ways the easiest way of overcoming that is that when you develop your employee value proposition and you develop your mission, vision, and values, that both employees and leadership are both involved in that process. Because I guess if you have a mission, vision, values, which is created by leadership, but the employees don't agree with it, it's not going to work. If you have an employee value proposition that's created by leadership or by employees without the interaction between the two, it's not going to work. So you need that cooperation all the way through when you're establishing the culture and the employee value proposition in order to stop there being as big a gap between your employee culture and your leadership culture, I guess.
Yeah, and also a lot of things comes to another three-way system, especially engagement. Leadership in one side, managers on the other side, and employees. These three things also need to talk to each other when it comes to employee experience and because employee engagement cannot be created by one group. It can't be created by HR on its own. We can't say that it's HR's responsibility or leadership's responsibility. It is also a three-way system. Leadership needs to take actions. Managers needs to enable and help employees. But at the same time, employees don't have a kind of right to say, okay, I don't care. The organization or HR or leadership have to make me engaged. Wait a second, as employees, we have responsibilities to make ourselves engaged. So how are we going to do this? Again, by following the paths we talked about, creating the right EVP, creating an excellent employee experience, and the output is employee engagement. And obviously, listening, continuous information data from our employees are crucial. How we do this, obviously, nowadays, like CX, we survey people, we collect data.
Yeah. So listening is an important thing. It's interesting what you say about the other three-way relationship being between employees management and leadership, because in customer experience world, there's a slightly different relationship between those three groups.
Mm-hmm.
So typically what we see in the customer experience world is that in terms of understanding customers, that your frontline people, your employees who deal with customers on a regular basis, they usually understand customers really well. Yeah. And the senior management team, often they will actually understand customers really well as well, but at a strategic level. So they'll understand the marketplace and the things that are going on and how they need to reposition their business relative to customers. And often senior managers have a good intuitive understanding as to what customers need as well. And the problem often comes from the middle management, who are not close enough to the customers and are not close enough to the strategic decision making. And often I feel very sorry for middle management, but often they're in this middle space where the employees don't feel like they're being listened to in terms of their opinions about customers, and the middle management are just not informed enough from a leadership perspective about how things work. So a slightly different relationship from a customer perspective, but there is that triangular relationship. Unfortunately, it's the middle management that ends up being the poor cousin often.
Yeah. But traditionally, obviously, the three-way system I explained is the ideal scenario. Unfortunately, organizations don't apply three-way system.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are fantastic organizations out there who are do their best, but traditionally, still in organizations, some leaders say, "I don't believe in employee engagement. It's HR's job.
Right.
Survey, collect the data. It's a project." And managers are again looking at HR, saying that, "Look, collect the data. Let me, bring me the data. Let me understand what's going on." So if we don't look at this from a holistic point of view, if we don't look at this from a kind of collaborative system, it usually fails, because at the end of the equation, there are actions, EX or CX, it doesn't matter. We need to take actions.
And often the middle management are left with those actions. I've seen that before. Employee satisfaction data gets fed back to middle management, and they are more interested in their reputation with senior management than they are actually resolving their employees' issues.
Exactly. So it's typical, like as an employee, you come to me and say, "Look, can you do this for me, or can we sort this out, or I have a problem," and I'll do, "Oh, I understand that, I see this, but sorry, I can't do anything about it because, top management is completely in a different universe. They're not supporting me. As a manager, I like to support you, but I can't." These are typical words we hear many, many times from organizations, from the middle management. But in the ideal world, in the ideal scenario, these 3 points, leadership, managers, and employees, HR, obviously, they have the equal responsibility to apply, rights and excellent employee experience to reach to the good employee engagement levels. Because
I suppose that is a problem. If you think about if those middle managers are saying, "I'd like to help you, but I can't," because they don't feel as if they have the empowerment from the senior management to be able to go ahead and make those kind of decisions. It's a little bit like the middle managers' hands are tied, or they feel like their hands are tied.
Exactly. I see employee engagement is like a health of the organization.
That's a good way of putting it.
It's an outcome. It's you do the right things, and at the end, you kind of do a scan or an MRI scan of the whole organization.
Yeah.
And then you say that, yes, we have a healthy employee engagement. or we have risks, we have obstacles. Because I mean, I say health. I mean, I think it's very valid, this sort of analogy, because I mean, I might look healthy to you, but if you take me to the lab or to the GP, and if they do it, you know, blood tests, they might find that, you know, I might have a high cholesterol, or I have high blood pressure. Maybe I'm not feeling it, but it's important to pinpoint and understand the risks.
Yeah.
Therefore, take action. So that's
Absolutely.
why employee engagement is not a score. It's not a project. It's the outcome of this series of right actions by these three groups of
Yeah. So
people.
in terms of the health, if you have good employee engagement, that suggests that employees are getting a good experience, and employees are getting a good experience because the contract between management and leadership and employees works well and supports the stated culture.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the stated employee value proposition. Okay,
Exactly.
cool.
Exactly.
Right, coming on to my next question, if I may, because I've
Sure.
listed a series of questions here. So in customer experience, we do journey mapping, customer journey mapping, obviously. And when I do customer journey mapping, they're obviously, what we usually do is create what we call a customer journey framework, which is the different steps and stages of the journey for a customer. And depending if we've got different persona, if we've gone from profiling to segmentation to persona building, and then persona building to journey mapping, because we might journey map different personas. Typically, there are standard steps in the journey from a customer perspective. From an employee, because I know journey mapping is also used in employee experience. Do you use journey mapping, and what are the stages of the journey from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. It's a very, very crucial point you raised, because in the employee experience, yes, we have more or less the same journey mapping. You know, of course, there might be some differences, but I like to just go through them one by one.
Yes, please. Yeah. So
Let's try
you
to
do use it, and there are different steps in the process.
Exactly. We have kind of 6 steps in the employee journey. If
Right.
we go through them one by one, maybe at the same time we can link it to customer experience as well.
Yeah.
So the first step, which is actually very relevant when we talk to customer experience, is before joining. You know, in the journey, in the employee experience journey, things don't start when we walk into an office. You know, it's not recruitment. It's not the first phase. Beforehand, there's a very crucial phase. We call it before joining. I mean, think of anyone. They prepare their CVs, and they decide to send their CVs to an organization, to a company. Basically, employee journey, employee experience starts for both sides, for an employer and employer, at that point, because there's a thing called reputation. I mean, we all talk about employee branding. You know, if your employee branding is strong, if you have a good reputation, and also as a brand, if the potential employee is your customer, a good customer, he or she is very likely to want to work for you, work for that organization. So before joining stage, potentials do their homework. You know, they check Glassdoor, they check LinkedIn, they check various social media sites to see how this company is performing from various perspectives, and they kind of dream. You know, it's a dream. Before joining is you dream something. You know, if I work for XYZ, yes, I like to be here. I like to do this. I know that this is a fantastic company. So what we want as an employer, we want this dream to become true, or to be true for our potentials. So the second step is obviously recruitment. We walk into an office. Obviously nowadays we can't do that. We have to do virtual offices. Things change, but in reality, as we walk into somewhere and we see, we smell, we observe how people work. They offer us to your coffee, you know, how the company approach us or welcome us, you know,
Yeah.
this recruitment stage. So employees ask some questions to themselves because it's very daunting, you know, crucial stage for everyone. You know, they say, wait a second, is it the right culture for me? I mean, can I see a positive chemistry here? Is there a kind of a connection here? I mean, I work here. So recruitment stage is the second very crucial step in the employee experience.
Okay.
Obviously,
Yeah.
stage, which is, in my view, the most crucial one, is called onboarding.
Okay. So just to stop you there very quickly before you go into onboarding, you spoke about before joining, recruitment and onboarding. If I was looking at that generically from a customer experience perspective, I'd say before joining is usually what we call the awareness and consideration phase. And then recruitment is what we would call purchase, because it's about the customer buying the product.
Yeah.
And then the next stage, which would be welcome and onboarding, which is exactly the words that you've used. So you see that these phases kind of reflect each other. Anyway, sorry, I'll let you carry on with onboarding.
No, but it's great. I mean, you see, there's a, you know, like a photocopy relationship between CX
Yeah, absolutely.
and we're actually talking the same thing. You know,
It's the same thing.
And you know, it's sometimes it makes me really sad not bringing these two things together and get to data. But yeah, I mean, let's carry on with onboarding, which is extremely crucial. I mean, I will give you data from 2019 study. Believe it or not, around 1/3, you know, could be 30 to 33% of the employees leave the organizations in the onboarding stage, or there's a big risk of losing 1/3 of your potential.
Wow, a third. So how long do you consider the onboarding phase to be?
Well, it could be from, you know, up to 1.5 years, let's say, because some organizations call it 6 months, some organizations say a year, but let's say from the first day till 1.5 years. But I'll give you another example from US. Bamboo HR, it's an HR software company, conducted a survey in 2019.
Yeah.
And 31% of the US employees leave the organization in the first
what? Sorry, I missed that.
First six months.
6 months.
Yeah.
31% in 6 months.
31%. It's crazy.
Wow.
Crazy. And Gallup.
That is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And Gallup also conducted a survey in 2019. And in that study, only 12% of employees think that their employers did a good job during the onboarding stage.
Wow.
12%.
Wow.
So this is extremely crucial because, I mean, can you imagine the money, effort, time, everything we put on place to keep these potentials? I mean,
to recruit people costs so much money.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
You're throwing a third of it away, and especially if only 12% of people think their employers have done a good job. I can think about experiences I've had as an employee before I became a consultant, where and even as a consultant where I've worked as a contractor, so I'm almost like an employee anyway. We're working within the business because I've done that a couple of times as well. And it's true, when you think back at your experiences, often I can think of some very good ones, but more often than not, I can think of just really, really terrible examples of onboarding. It's crazy.
Yeah. So you start with a dream, and when it comes to the reality during onboarding stage, so these two things need to fit with each other. If it doesn't fit, people quit.
Okay.
And there's excuses, like they say, "Oh, I didn't like my manager. I was expecting a different culture. I couldn't understand my, job. The tasks weren't clear." There were so many different feedback we get from employees. But some rules, basic rules during the onboarding stage for EX, employee experiences. First, you need to have a structure, very good structure. It needs to be positive from every aspect. And we need clarity, clear information about the company, clear information about who is who, and clear information about the job that we're going to perform. The title, our limits. If we have, flexibility, what kind of flexibility, and a kind of the clear work structure. Yeah. If these things are more or less there, employees feel that, yeah, this is the right place for me and I can carry on.
So often having something as solid as a detailed job description,
yeah,
it can't do any harm, I don't suppose. Mm. Is there a danger if you have like a detailed job description that people feel as if they're restricted in terms of their ability to share their talents?
Well, could be, but at the same time, I'll give you an example from a French dairy manufacturer called Lactalis. Not right. Everywhere, but in certain countries in Lactalis, before somebody starts their job, they send them to different locations or different departments to right. see work. For instance, in Turkey, they started a program. They want each role to work with their internal customers in the first 1.5 months. So you need to that transition stage. You need to understand who is who, your customer, etc. And you experience different things in different locations or different departments. Then you sit down on your desk and start your work. So there's so many different ways. Obviously, there's no harm to put a structure about your role. Yeah. But again, honesty and clarity is the important. Yeah. Because some titles will have very clear structure. Let's say if you're working for a legal department or supply chain, it could be more rigid. But if you're working for sales, you might have some flexibility. If from the beginning, if these things are told by the management very clearly, where the flexibilities are or what things are rigid, therefore it's easier for an employee to adjust. And things are not going to be a surprise. Okay. So this is how I see.
Cool. Okay. So onboarding, what's the next step after onboarding?
Yeah, next fourth point stage is performance. So
performance,
exactly, because everybody would like to perform successfully in the organization, but we need support. Again, I'll make an analogy. Let's say I'm a sprinter and I have the potential of running 100 meters in 10 seconds. By the way, I wish I could. but let's say I have the potential. And what I expect as an employee or as a runner, as a sprinter, good coach, good equipment, a place I can train, somebody's feeding me correctly, I get protein and all the energy, all the vitamins, in a good structure, and I'm looked after. So in business world, we call this enablement. This is support we get from our managers, because enablement is not only about the tool resources, it's also about the motivation and well-being. It's a broader subject.
So is enablement like a bigger version of empowerment then?
Yes, exactly. Who's responsible for that? Mainly day-to-day basis is our manager or managers.
Absolutely.
very critical. And in the performance stage, 100% all employees would like to see clear expectations from them about performance. In other words, targets, fair, clear, and measurable targets, which is
Yeah.
very important in the experience. And at the same time, when we perform as employees, we expect to get feedback, constant feedback, because therefore we can correct our actions, or we can correct the steps in the forthcoming.
That's interesting, actually, because when I was with American Express, when we used to do quarterly reviews, they had two documents at the quarterly reviews, and one was the job description. So we would review the job description and say, is this a fair reflection of what your job is? And then the next document was about looking at the different aspects of the job, and then how well I performed against those different aspects of the job. So that sounds very, very similar to the process that you're talking about.
Exactly. And it's a two-way system. We don't want to see a kind of managers coming in and imposing everything to you, or just deciding that, okay, your score is, I don't know, 5 out of 10. That's it. This is your score. No, we don't want this. We want this stage to be mutual understanding, proper feedback session. And also it's valuable for managers, because they need to collect feedback for themselves at the same time at this stage. We need to underline that, it's very, very critical for the organization and managers as well. So the fifth step in the employee experience is growth and development, because
Right, okay.
Yeah, we performed, and obviously we like to grow in the organization. What does it mean? Obviously, we all like to have a better title, more money, but career is not about a chimney. I think world is changing. I think it's all about fairness, and also it's all about the realities of the agreements. So if there's clarity there, and if there's clear map for everyone from the start, it's easier to shake hands. Sometimes a career might be horizontal,
Yes.
Maybe I hate managing people. Not everybody's a manager.
Not everybody. It's interesting, because when you go to university and you do a business degree or something like that, everybody's kind of the impression that everybody's going to be a leader. But leadership is if you look at the Myers-Briggs stuff, not everybody is a natural leader, and that's fine if you can come to terms with that. Everybody needs to lead from time to time, but just because you have to lead from time to time doesn't necessarily mean that leadership is your forte. And another story, I have a friend who works in IT, and he got his degree from Cambridge University. The guy is super, super bright. But when he started his career, the first few years, he climbed a few rungs up the ladder. And then he got to a point where he found that he really enjoyed the technical side of what he did as a computer guy, because he was a programmer. But what he hated was the management stuff, because he spent so much time performance managing other people that he found that he was losing his technical skills, because technology advances, programming advances. He was falling behind, and he was saying, I hate that. How can I manage people when they know more about the subject than I do? So he said, I don't want to manage people anymore, and he became a technical expert. Therefore, his career didn't go up; it went sideways. But he's much happier now as a person.
Yeah. But that fairness is very, very important. If we are kind of helping people to grow, horizontally, yes, we're not giving them any managerial responsibilities or a title, but we need to look after their, wage or benefits, or we need to show them that, they get back what they're giving to the organization.
So when you're career planning for people, although they might not be going up the ladder, it doesn't mean if they're going sideways and they're becoming more of a technical expert in a particular area, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be disadvantaged from a benefit perspective.
Yeah. But I like to also add something else in, because obviously when we have this conversation, we're not only talking about the UK. Each organization, or there are a lot of organizations out there operating in different, and cultures differ from one country to another. For instance, if we talk about India, if there's no a kind of career ladder, people might have an issue there.
Yes.
Same in some parts of Mediterranean. Italians, Turks, Greeks, they like titles. They like to be managers because it's also social
status
that they can show it to their loved ones and people. So it's very, very important to adapt the employee experience based on the culture. I'm not saying that flexible, but there's certain things that you can't apply everywhere.
Yeah, I've seen this recently on LinkedIn, where you often get jobs thrown at you, and so are you interested in this job? And I saw this one job, and it was called something like technical specialist or something, stroke VP, and I just thought, years and years ago, how would anybody who was a technical specialist ever be able to carry the title vice president? But I suppose if the technical specialist is that important to the organization will be prepared to turn that person into a vice president. So that's a status thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. But also it's a two-way system, sometimes I talk to friends from younger generation, and I mean, we also need to understand what are their needs, because you asked me at the beginning about segmentation, because obviously this employee experience cannot be realized without segmenting the scenarios for each group. Yeah. Because each group has a different expectation plus need.
So the generic structure of the journey, so far we've had before joining, recruitment, onboarding, performance and growth. That structure is going to be the same for everybody, but the reality of applying that structure is going to be different depending on the segment of employees that you're applying it to.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Obviously, there are basics or fundamentals to be universal and global, but there might be, obviously, fairness and legally binding things are important, but there could be some cultural differences which any organizations should be ready to show and put in front of their employees. But again, I like to underline it because I don't want to be misunderstood. Obviously, fairness or the fundamental structure has to be equal for everyone, but we can't deny, we can't just put a blind eye on cultural differences. I'll stop with the last bit. Let me kind of finish the circle. The
last step of the journey.
Last step of the journey is
okay.
Leaving.
Of course, yeah.
Unfortunate.
No, not many people have a job for life nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. But again, leaving is a reality of business life. I think some of us have already been there. Some of us
many times. Yeah, I'm a bit of a maverick, so there you go.
But I'm sure you agree with me. You'll agree with me. But if the leaving stage is positive, I think it's a fantastic place to be, because we say that, okay, reality's changed. Yes, I'm leaving, but I'm still an advocate. I'm still an ambassador of that brand. I'm still a customer. I'm still buying, or using their services. I think if we manage to have this stage positive, it's a win-win situation for both sides. Because also as an employee, I might, go back and work for them again in 5 years' time. So, it's extremely crucial to basically work on scenarios for each step of these employee experience stages. How we do this, because we do surveys as employee experience consultants or experts. Obviously, we collect data, and based on these steps, we create scenarios based on demographic information. Departments, which line we're working for, because that might again slightly differ for your role. Again, which role you have, manager, specialist, or depending on what kind of title you have, and also gender. You might have a gender policy or some certain policies,
disability policies, race
diversity
relation policies, positive discrimination, lots of stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly. And also age. We might like to think different for Y generation or else. Plus the length of service, tenure is also important, because
of course,
wherever you are in your career in the organization, your needs, your experience might differ from a new starter. So if we can create the experience based on these segments, these personas, like you do in CX, then it's easier to reach to a good employee engagement levels, or healthy.
That's interesting. Clearly the way that you do it and the way that we do it is slightly different, because we do segmentation. The way that I do it is behavioral segmentation. I know a lot of people use psychographic segmentation. I'm not a big fan, purely because the fact that most organizations don't have a lot of psychographic data. Whereas behavioral data, if you are sophisticated in the way of using it, it doesn't tell you only what somebody's doing, it also tells you why they're doing it. But if somebody's interested in finding more about that, they can listen to the last CX Club vlog and they'll find out more about that one. Whereas I guess you look at it differently by function, by role, by demographics, by tenure, all of these other things that you've spoken about. But the principle of having segmentation is the same, which is an interesting one. I suppose one of the things that I've been thinking about during this conversation is also the fact that the 7S model, which I think originally came from McKinsey's, which I use for what I would call an internal audit of an organization. And there are different aspects in there about people in there. So I suppose in many ways, a lot of the things that we've spoken about, culture, shared values, people and skills and everything like that, kind of reflects the entire conversation that we've been having, really, doesn't it? But I guess what we've done is we've taken those 7 S's and put it in more into a logical process flow, really.
Exactly. Well, there many correlations between EX and CX, and I think we like to see more of professionals, HR, sales, or top management to have the initiative or the leadership to start merging these two topics.
Yep.
It's an experiment, I know. I mean, EX is, as I said at the beginning, it's new.
To be honest, a piece of work that I've been approached about recently, it's really interesting because it's a customer experience piece. It's actually a customer service piece, which potentially could become bigger and be a customer experience piece. But it's interesting because I've been approached about this subject by the HR director.
Fantastic.
And that's never happened before, but clearly because they understand that what we're trying to do is going to be people-centered.
Yeah.
The HR guy needs to be involved in that. Anyway, look, Alan, thank you ever so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on to CX Club. And when the world gets back to normal, we can hopefully meet up for a glass of wine at it's the Jacobs Inn, isn't it?
Yeah, we can do that. I'd love to do that. And
we can meet in the beer garden, actually.
Yeah, we can now.
Social distancing's probably allowed now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, we can put kind of 2 meters between us and
perspex sheet in between us.
Sheet, yeah. We can put some A4, A3s. Our notes.
Exactly. Who knows? Anything like. Okay, mate. Well, look. Thank you very much, Alan, for your time. I really appreciate that. Thank you to everybody who is tuning in to CX Club. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions for me or Alan, please ping across messages, through social media. This will be communicated on various different social media platforms. So please send us your questions and we'll try and address those issues as we go along. Okay. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thanks very much. Before I go, can I say something? The last word?
Please.
We all talk about return of investment, which we all love to see, but maybe we can start with a new term, return of experiences.
Oh, that's a nice one. I like that. What's the return on experience? That's true. We need to create, hey, wait a minute, we could be millionaires. We create a new metric. How about that? Everybody seems to want to create new metrics nowadays. Return on experience. Okay, mate, take care. Thank you very much, Ellen.
Thanks so much,
okay.
Ian. Thanks for having me.
Okay, cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.